You don't need a degree in political science to understand just how unprecedented and how toxic this moment in American politics really is. You can feel it. Pick up the paper, look at the stories on the front page, turn on the TV for 10 minutes. It's more than a feeling. It's now a provable fact. The New York Times used what is called natural language processing to analyze nearly 4 million items. They included tweets, Facebook ads, newsletters, congressional speeches. The result, not only an impressive accounting of a decade's worth of inflammatory rhetoric, but also its primary sources from that extraordinary piece of Times reporting. Quote, in the year and a half after the January 6th Capitol riot, Republicans on average used divisive words and phrases more than twice as often as Democrats in tweets and 6 times as often in emails to their constituents. To get even more specific, Republicans who voted to reject the 2020 election results are at the forefront of that poison, according to the Times report. And alarmingly, an expert described their use of what are called devil terms, things that are so unquestionably bad that you can't have a debate about them. That's where we are. Devil terms. Let's bring in former Republican Congressman David Jolly and Jason Johnson, journalism and politics professor at Morgan State University, as well as the host of the podcast A Word with Jason Johnson. Both are MSNBC contributors. You two may be the only people not shocked by this reporting, because I feel like it's what the substance of our conversations over not just the last 2 years, but the last 6. But I almost dropped my newspaper, and I scrubbed my glasses when I saw devil on the front page of the Sunday paper, and I said, what? But when you look at we cover the violence almost with our tree against the branches, but when you step back, this story really is the forest, and the forest has been planted with such poisonous rhetoric that they invoke the devil, Jason.
Yeah, and I think, Nicole, like there's no exorcism for this. There's no magical wand. There's no holy water that the Biden administration can throw on this and take this out of the Republican organization, because they have been committed to this for really longer than 10 years. And Nicole, actually, and I am the political scientist, so I was kind of looking at the data and did some background work on this. It's actually even worse than what's reported, because you have to understand that when it comes to terms that are considered polarizing, terms like fascism and Nazi are considered to be polarizing terms. But unfortunately, those are the correct ways to describe what is happening with Republicans. So in many respects, if you took some of that data out, it would be worse. You would see 5 times as many Republicans using these devil terms, using terms that are absolutely dangerous and polarizing to society. And unfortunately, oftentimes, for I think too long, their rhetoric was put on an equal ground with Democrats and people who are in favor of democracy. The Republicans would say, hey, you guys are part of a terrible, evil cult that's in favor of eating children, and you're pedophiles and you're groomers. And Democrats and democracy defenders would say, yeah, that's the kind of language that you use in fascism. And then the report would be, Democrats call Republicans fascists, and Republicans say that the Democrats are groomers. These are not on equal terms. One is the truth, and the other is a lie. And that's what we have to make sure that we talk about every single day, because otherwise it makes it look like that kind of behavior and that kind of language is normalized.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Jason is also indicting is this, I think, in our politics in the past, having 2 sides of a debate was what our muscle memory brought to us. It's wholly inappropriate for this moment. And David, that was never, I mean, that's been clear to me for, exactly 5 years. It's how Trump defeated all the Republicans. I mean, he's an asymmetrical, sort of warrior. But Jonathan Greenblatt sitting here and saying that the danger of the rise in anti-Semitism is the silence of the most powerful leaders in the Republican Party. And I said, why won't Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy condemn anti-Semitism from Donald Trump? And he wouldn't tell me what their conversations sounded like. And Kanye. I mean, you've got celebrities, dropping any association with Kanye. And Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy won't condemn Donald Trump's anti-Semitic attacks. And he said, listen, Mitch McConnell won't defend his wife when Trump called her Coco Chow or whatever Trump's racist smear was against her. This is what scares me as much as the rise in hatred, the silence, the acquiescence, the silent enabling of the most powerful Republicans in our country. What do we do about that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you why Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy won't denounce Kanye and anti-Semitism. And racist insults to McConnell's wife because they are weak cowards with no moral fiber and an inability to actually lead the country in the right moral direction. That's why. And it's hard to say those words, but it goes to your premise, which is we are in an era in which there are not two sides to every issue. The two sides, as Jason say, should not be given equity in how they handle these very critical matters. And it's important to recognize that this language, these words, work, right? It is a reflection of our culture, but importantly, it's a reflection of our candidates. I remember, Nicole, the very first time, as a first-time candidate, I was a little green. We sent out a mailer that when I saw it, when I received it in my mailbox, I said, oh, wow, like, I'm not sure I would have said that. And I had a conversation with my team, and my team kind of told me, look, if you have hesitations like that, let us know, because the mail should reflect who you are. And I learned my lesson. I own those words. My name was on it, but I never did it again. But there are candidates day after day that continue to do it again. And so it's right that we hold McConnell and McCarthy and candidates up and down the ballot responsible for this. I think that the paradox here is that you can't actually beat back this issue by arguing about this issue because we know it works, right? Ron DeSantis's leadership of divide and hate and culture wars have actually been rewarded with a majority opinion in the state of Florida. So the paradox is the way you defeat people with that spirit is actually on different issues, on issues that resonate politically, that build a majority around your policies and around your leadership that counter the hate and division. It's not a natural response to those who use these devil words, if you will, but it's the strategic response to actually redirect where we're going as a country.
I don't love polls, but I do want to put this up because we covered one last week along these lines. Jason, 21% of Americans think threats to democracy is the top issue. In this poll, it's an NBC News poll, it tops all the questions about the economy. I think, and I've said this before, women are deleting ovulation trackers. I don't think you can poll for abortion anymore. I think people are so afraid. What do you detect? What do you think is out there in sort of the public consciousness right now?
Well, the problem, Nicole, that I see with polls that talk about people fearing about threats to democracy, unless your polling is very sophisticated, you're catching multiple people in that. Because you've got election deniers who will say the same thing, and they're liars. And they're disturbed, right? In addition to your regular Americans who are saying, hey, I went to vote in Georgia and found out that someone who's never met me, never seen me, can launch a voter challenge against me early voting just based on my zip code and demographics, right? Those are two people who can say, my number one concern is the protection of American democracy, but they're coming from it from completely opposite ends. And that's part of the problem that we have sometimes in our discussion of these issues. You have one side, which is the majority of the American people, who just want to go to work, eat dinner, stay safe, pay less in gas prices, and know that they have their same medical rights that they woke up with earlier this year. And then you have another group of people who are essentially fascists, and they want an authoritarian government. We have to stop pretending that we're talking about friends and neighbors. You're talking about people who want to basically imprison women in their bodies and make them completely subjective to men. You're talking about people who don't think black people should have a right to do anything but play sports. You're talking about a group of people who on a regular basis attack everybody of a different religion. I am old enough to know, or old enough, been around long enough, I hate saying this kind of phrase, I never imagined that we would see the same kind of racism towards faith that we saw in the early 2000s against Muslims. But literally, it's happening right now against Jewish people. Like, the anti-Semitism is almost hitting the levels that we saw during the Gulf War. Right? That's what we're facing in America right now. And unless we talk about it that way, unless the polling reflects that, it still makes it seem like the people who are a danger to the rest of us are on equal footing with those of us who are just trying to live regular lives.
Not that Jason needs me to do this, but to prove Jason's point, we have to sneak in a break, but I'm going to show you what that looks like in America in 2022 on the other side of a break. Don't go anywhere.